Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're hanging out with Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov from covertactionmagazine.com. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. We're hanging out with Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov from oh my gosh, I lost it. Covert Action Magazine. Don't forget, that is the website you need to know about. You need to go to. It's covertactionmagazine.com. All of the evil deeds that are being done by the CIA, by intelligence operations worldwide, you can find all the good stuff there. And, let me ask you before we get started, Jeremy, your thoughts. There are people like, oh my God, this is what I'm hearing from people. I am so shocked at what's being found in the Epstein files. Garland, are you shocked? And I'm like, no, I do a show every Friday with Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov. No, shocked is not the word. Maybe shocked that some of it finally got out. Maybe suspicious that some of it may be, what shall we say, a controlled release. But there is enough meat in there that there are things being exposed that I didn't suspect would be exposed, but I damn sure knew they were happening. Do you have thoughts on that before we get going, Jeremy?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, as a historian, yeah, you're less surprised because these kind of things have been going on for a long, long time. Not just in the United States, but many other countries. And honeypot operations are a feature of intelligence agencies for a long time. And I was studying I was doing an article on the in the Harding administration, and the head of the head of the Washington Post basically they rented an apartment near Capitol Hill, and they would bring in prostitutes and young girls, and Warren Harding, the president, was involved, and it was the head of the Washington Post was bringing the girls, and this was during Prohibition, and they were drinking illegally, and then the girl got killed, and this guy Gaston Means, who later accused um, Mrs. Harding, Florence Harding, of killing her own husband because he was implicated in the Teapot Dome scandal. He actually helped get the girl to the hospital. All these wealthy politicians scramble because I think they were throwing glasses. They got really rowdy and they started like throwing stuff at the girls who were dancing topless, and this poor girl got hit with a glass and seriously injured. And these guys just like scrambled, and Harding's handlers just escorted him away so he wouldn't be at the scene. And this guy Gaston Means, who did like dirty work for the FBI, he actually got her the hospital. And then they maligned him because he accused Florence Harding of murdering Warren Harding, and then he went down as this bad guy. And there's even an HBO series, and he's the bad guy. And actually, he was the good guy, I think. But these guys were involved in a lot of, bacchanalia. They abused their power and committed all kind of illegal acts. And there were honeypot operations. That was in the 1920s. And J. Edgar Hoover that's when he started his career, and he was covering up stuff that was going on. So a lot of things actually don't change that much. It just takes on different nature. And I mean, it may be a bit more decadent now with the private island and the level of wealth that Epstein has, and his circle is just absolutely obscene. But a lot of the activities, yeah, fit a pattern. I also studied Lyndon Johnson's career, and and his Bobby Baker was his top aide, who ended up going to prison. And Baker set up a house in Washington, and Johnson was the master of the Senate. And Baker basically set up a brothel on Capitol Hill, and they would bring politicians there, give them all kinds of girls and alcohol and have a good time. But then they would have the photos and stuff of them with these girls, so they could use it as leverage so Johnson could pass the legislation he needed. So, and the CIA was involved with that. Johnson was very tight with the CIA, and I think they were working hand in glove, including the JFK assassination. So, there is a pattern of this kind of depraved behavior going back, well, over 100 years at least, that I've been able to trace, and that has been documented by some historians and journalists. So it's not, that surprising. And a lot of the media may be diverting attention by focusing on the sex stuff, and also like the names, people who just corresponded with Epstein. I mean, that doesn't necessarily implicate them in anything bad he was doing. This is a very influential guy, and he's cultivating many contacts. I don't think, and this is my personal opinion, somebody who had some correspondence with him should be blacklisted, or is a bad person, just because he was a manipulator who maybe had some interest in them for various reasons. But anyway, the media is focused on that, but they're missing the bigger picture of his intelligence ties, and how these intelligence agencies have used these kind of unethical means to blackmail people and to distort our entire political system. I think that's the big issue that's not being covered. And it's more kind of gossipy of who was friends with Epstein, and reading some of the emails, and most of them are just kind of mundane correspondence. And I think it's, to me, and this is again my opinion, some people may disagree, but the cancel culture goes too far. Like, just because somebody had some association with him, and it doesn't mean some of those people are not bad in their own right. Like, I'm no fan of Larry Summers of Harvard, king neoliberal, who did a lot of bad things, but he had to resign just because he was friendly with Epstein, and they were discussing, he was seeking some advice from him. I mean, I don't think that in specific should warrant Summers having to lose his job. Again, I don't like Summers, what he represented, but it's just an example. But anyway, it's that cancel culture, to me, goes too far. Anybody who associated with him at any time in his career has to be canceled and blacklisted. I don't go for that. I think that culture is dangerous because it could be used as a weapon to prohibit free speech. And also sometimes the Me Too movement goes too far. I mean, obviously in this case, there was serious sexual crime that shouldn't be taken lightly at all. But that gets at my point that the intelligence agencies are the one driving this, and he was immune from prosecution because he had protection from the intelligence agencies, and this was part of their modus operandi. And he was doing all kinds of other dirty work for the intelligence service, and hopefully I think those exposés are most important, and those are coming out in more alternative media. Like Mint Press had a good expose of stuff he was doing related to Iran-Contra and Israeli intelligence. I think that is especially important to try and uncover, because it can help us better understand the nefarious nature of U.S. intelligence, and the connection between the CIA and Mossad, because I think Epstein was working for both, and the two of them have been involved in some horrendous deeds. So
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point, and that is that no, they're always going to work to distract us, right? And so they give us some names, some easy names to say, okay, this guy talked to Epstein, this guy sent an email to Epstein, and we can be outraged. What we know is over half of the documents have not been shown. Over half of the documents. So the names of people who were really involved in various things, the true connections of power and of money moving, for instance, I will guarantee you that there's a lot of conversations about Monica Lewinsky and about that scandal, because Epstein was in the middle of it. All kinds of murders. The guy Mark Middleton, who let Epstein into the White House like 14 times or something, signed him in under Clinton, and then Middleton was found, he hanged himself Then he shot himself in the chest with a shotgun. And then the first article said there was no gun found. And then articles came out that said the gun was found, but it was 30 feet from the scene. Well, how do you hang yourself, then shoot yourself in the chest with a shotgun and somehow throw the gun 30 feet from the scene? And they said, oh, it was from the recoil. There ain't no shotgun in the world that's going to, a cannon wouldn't recoil and fly for 30 feet. But my point being, all those types of things. There could have been discussions of assassinations, guaranteed that that was it. You know, so many things. So they want to get us hung up on Larry Summers or Noam Chomsky. They want us to argue about Summers or Chomsky. They don't want us to look at the, you know, to say, well, what about all these other evil and devious deeds that were done? They give us some things. So that's why I say we look at it and we take what we can and work with what we can, understanding that even this is a controlled release. And then they'll take some of the things that they want us to talk about and they'll amplify them. So we talk about Chomsky all the time, you know what I mean? Or something like that. And the things in there that are really bad, we're not talking about those. We're talking about Chomsky or something like that, you know? That's so I say you have to be careful because they have a way of controlling the information for these things. But at any rate,
yeah, I agree fully with your assessment. And they make like he's just a sick pedophile, and they don't, you know, acknowledge that really he was working for intelligence agencies as part of a much wider intelligence operation. So,
yeah, they leave out all the, and if he was involved in Iran-Contra, he was involved in all of it.
mm-hmm.
He was involved in all of it. He was involved in drug running. He was involved in all of it. At any rate, speaking of nefarious activities against American people, Covert Action magazine, and this is a great article, Lyndon B. Johnson used the CIA to go after a famous singer after she criticized the Vietnam War. Eartha Kitt. This article continues Covert Actions magazine to expose the CIA's nefarious history, and for Black History Month. And there's Eartha Kitt, as she was when she was Catwoman, and man, she was gorgeous. But at any rate, the point being, she criticized the Vietnam War, and she was a big name. And the CIA said, "Oh, you got to pay for that." What do we need to know?
Well, yeah, I think it's an important history for people to understand, and we need to reform or abolish the CIA. Well, I would advocate we need a movement to abolish the CIA after exposing all the things it's done to terrorize regular people, including you know, people who spoke out for social justice issues and causes. And you know, Eartha Kitt was a beloved actress whose you know, singing was outstanding. You know, she's had various hit songs that are still you can hear on the radio. And I actually hadn't heard about her. I mean, I knew of these songs. She sang some famous Christmas song like Santa Baby was one of them, and she was Catwoman in the original Batman series. So she was a great actress and singer. But they, you know, blacklisted and harassed her because she was invited to the White House because she was also doing, you know, community work with youth and trying to get you know, constructive program for at-risk youth. And then she spoke out, you know, at this event at the White House it was run by Lady Bird Johnson, and then Lyndon Johnson also came by, and you know, she spoke out and said, well, you know, one of the reasons, because like Lady Bird was talking about all these, you know, youth rebellion, you know, in the 60s with the marijuana use and the counterculture, and there was a lot of, you know, the time of youth rebellion. And so Eartha Kitt was the only one, you know, I think a lot of the women wanted to say something but didn't have the courage of Eartha Kitt, who spoke up and said, well, you know, a lot of these youth are rebelling because they don't want to be sent to Vietnam and shot. And you know, their mother don't raise them to be killed in Vietnam, and you know, they're going to rebel because of this, you know, terrible war, and they're losing respect for established institutions that are supporting that terrible war, and want to send them to be killed. And that really angered the Johnsons, you know, and they didn't like people speaking up and criticizing the war that they were supported. So I think they didn't even, you know, she was given a limousine to come to the White House, and then they told the limo driver not to take her home,
No,
and she had
geez.
to take a cab. And then they like called all their contacts in the media and said, "I don't." And Lyndon Johnson said, "I don't want to see her in the media ever again." Because she was often on TV. She was featured on variety shows and popular shows of that era. And Johnson had tremendous connections in the media, and that's something that's not widely known. And that's how he was able to cultivate a sympathetic image for himself, and I think cover up the JFK assassination, because he was, I think, as we've discussed on the show, he was a central figure in the JFK assassination and then the cover up. So he had all these contacts, and he told them he never wanted to see her on TV. And her agent fired her, and she couldn't book. She performed at a lot of nightclubs and had a lucrative career. It's somewhat like Paul Robeson, who lost a fortune because of similar kind of blacklisting. And it took another decade or two before she could revitalize her career in the 80s, I believe. And she started doing like cartoons, and she was a voice for a lot of cartoons like in the 90s. So she made a good living again in the 90s, but there was a good 20-year period where she faced blacklisting and was effectively retaliated against for speaking out against the Vietnam War.
Here's what's interesting, and it always comes back to this. You have Johnson ordered the CIA to amass a file on Kitt, which described her as having a very nasty disposition, nasty person, like Trump's always said, she's a nasty woman, and I don't like it. And as being a spoiled child, very crude, and having a vile tongue. The vile tongue to me means she spoke up against the system. She doesn't know her place. But here's what's interesting. It falsely claimed that she was a sadistic nymphomaniac. When it comes to intelligence, they always go for some kind of a sexual thing. They always call it's always some kind of you're involved in sexual, somebody's gay, somebody they're hot, they're closeted gay. They love to use that against people. They're you're a nymphomaniac. It's like that's the go-to move for them to attack their enemies. Has to be something about sexually some sexual accusation.
Yeah, and that's what they do. They spread rumor, and that was designed to destroy her reputation. I think they wrote these false reports about her, and she was subjected to illegal surveillance and harassment. And then they spread these false rumors about her being some kind of depraved nymphomaniac, and it was totally false. And it was designed to defame her character, and that's a method they use. And that's why, yeah, with the Me Too, that could be a reason. It goes too far sometimes. It's used as a weapon to destroy people, and it unfortunately undermined the credibility of females who are legitimate victims of male sexual predators, among them Bill Clinton. But then there are a lot of cases where they spread false rumors just to defame people. So that is one of the nefarious tactics. Yeah, that's why studying the history can better understand the abuses of these agencies, and that's why they need to be abolished, and a new agency has to be developed that doesn't engage in these kind of practices, because it's not benefiting national security. It's just smearing good people like Eartha Kitt. So.
One of the things we see here, right, and that is exactly why they would go after her. Here now, someone has a sign, Eartha Kitt speaks for the women of America. In the same way that, there are many suspicious about the killing of, what's his name from the Beatles,
John Lennon, yeah.
John Lennon, right? That one of the things these intelligence agencies and these people in power don't like is a person whose name, like I said, John Lennon, you brought up Paul Robeson, Eartha Kitt, these other people, Ed Asner, various people who have spoken out against war and against the machine. People then use their names and invoke their names. Oh, well, John Lennon, look at this. He's got a great song. Oh, look at these things. They sing their songs. They speak up. And that they use that to amplify their anti-war message. And that infuriates. It seems to me they go out of their way to go after people who speak up, and we see it in Hollywood now. People who were upset with Israel, with Zionist policies that were, and genocide. Now there are a list going around that says this person can't work for Paramount, or nobody will hire this people. People get fired from their agents because they speak out and they're unhappy with foreign policy.
Yeah, they target, they see rightly, and that these people are kind of influencers. They have a huge fan base, and these are very talented, charismatic people. So, and in that industry, celebrities. So they're going to influence many, many people. So, and there's long effort by the CIA to control American popular culture, to control the content of Hollywood movies. I mean, the McCarthy era, they went after the Hollywood 10, and they accused them of being communist. And these are more left-leaning directors who mixed, anti-war, produced movies with either anti-war themes or very pro-organized labor, and valorizing strikes. And then intimidated after they prosecuted the Hollywood 10. Subsequent generations of filmmakers were intimidated, and they stopped making those kind of movies with social justice messages in them, or promoting anti-war, or pro-labor, or supporting left-wing causes and movements. You don't find many Hollywood movies even today. And the CIA has. I've done other articles on the Hollywood and how the CIA set up its own liaison office. When there were a few films in the 70s that were critical of the CIA, they set up an office to basically streamline movies and prevent films like that from ever coming out again. Like Costa Gavras had some critical films about the CIA in Chile and Greece. So they couldn't have that anymore. So, yeah, they really focus on celebrities and Hollywood and music industry. And we can do another show. There's strong evidence that I think they helped they pushed the drug culture in the 60s to get youth away from political activism and just to kind of zonk themselves out with drugs. And and I actually have an article coming out in maybe another month or so. It's pretty ready to go, about Timothy Leary. And he was actually admitted to being a CIA agent, and he was promoting the drug culture and LSD as the way to peace. And he actually deliberately met with Jimi Hendrix and turned on Jimi Hendrix and Allen Ginsberg, because they were like Eartha Kitt, or John Lennon. They were influencers. These were big stars, and people loved their music. And if they were promoting something, then millions of people would be doing that. So if they were promoting anti-war, or urging people to march on Washington or to join the socialist movement, you'd have millions of young people. So better to have them urging youth to take drugs and zonk themselves out so they can't do anything productive. So that's just another example of the phenomenon you're describing. And I think they went to the extreme with Lenin. There's very strong evidence that the CIA was involved in his assassination. And there's a new book by David Whalen, a British author who investigated it for 3 or 4 years and showed how David Chapman was set up as a patsy and was like a CIA Manchurian candidate. And it was all a setup. And he wasn't the actual assassin. It was like the Robert Kennedy case, where the real assassin shot Lenin from the back, but Chapman was the guy who was blamed for it. And it was all a setup, because they were worried that Lenin was going to revitalize anti-war activism in the 80s. He was restarting his music career. He had taken a few years off in the 70s to add a child, and then he was getting back into political activism and anti-war music, and they were worried the 60s movement would revive in the 80s. So they had to kill him. But yeah, Eartha Kitt, they just blacklisted her and went after her, and she lost her stature and was much less known after by the early 70s. Probably most people wouldn't recognize her name because she no longer had the ability to perform on television, or they blocked her agent. Her agent fired her. So she
Yeah.
didn't have an agent. She couldn't book shows anymore, and her career kind of fizzled. And then she did find some work, a decade or two later, doing cartoons and stuff. But so and they sent a message. Other celebrities, could see what happened to her and other people, and if they want to, sustain their career or lifestyle, they realize they better tone it down or they better not, speak out. And that's the message that's sent. It intimidates people, and they're quite effective at doing that. Yeah, if you look at the Hollywood scene today, there are very few Hollywood people who speak out, and the ones that do that pay a price, as you say. Another example is Colin Kaepernick. He couldn't, football player, after he took the kneel and started speaking out, he lost his job with the 49ers, and other teams wouldn't pick him up, even though he was a very dynamic quarterback. I used to enjoy watching him because he was like Randall Cunningham. He can run. He was good thrower and runner.
Here's something interesting that I did want to ask you about. Under the 1947 National Security Act that established the CIA was barred from any domestic police or internal security functions. That's interesting because we do know they still go after people for instance, Russiagate, that they come up with reasons and excuses to say, if they wanted to go after Garland, they'd say, Garland's a Russian agent or, Iranian, Syrian, whatever, all of the above, Chinese agent. And then they just make an excuse. And how does that work? And what happened with Kitt?
Yeah, that was a violation of the CIA's own charter. And then I think they claim that the surveillance was confined to overseas, but I don't think so. I mean, how did they develop these huge files on her? Somebody was tracking her after that White House visit, and they were spreading the malicious, defamatory statements about her. So I don't know if those were widely circulated, but I think they had them, and they could release that. What they'll do is, with the Operation Mockingbird, and that was a clear violation of the CIA charter, where the CIA, cultivated journalists and leading newspapers and magazines, and that's where they would leak. When they develop these dossiers, which is often faulty information, and then they'll leak it to the friendly journalists to defame people who are a threat in some way, like Eartha Kitt was, because she was speaking out against the Vietnam War. Yeah, another case I was covering, I have an article coming out in the future, I was researching this guy named Claude Etherly, was one of the pilots in the Enola Gay, but he was more on the technical side. He was in one of the support planes, flying one of the support planes, but he was the only one who was part of the crew for any of the atomic bombs who spoke out against it, felt guilty, and started speaking out against nuclear weapons, and got in touch with some anti-war people like Bertrand Russell. So then they had this CIA journalist named William Bradford Huey, who had actually been an editor with the American Mercury, which was at one point an influential magazine that H.L. Mencken had founded. But then Huey took it over and brought in all these CIA writers like William F. Buckley. And for the article, I was reading some old issues from like the early 50s, which was fun to do, but it was clearly like CIA talking points and, supporting this hardline anti-communism and supporting the Korean War, this great moral cause, and that kind of stuff. And then he wrote this hatchet piece, a book, and set of articles defaming Claude Etherly, and that he was lying, and that he was trying to exploit his fame as a pilot, and that he was insincere in his critique of the nuclear arms race. So it just reminded me of Eartha Kitt, because they defame these people who speak out, whether it's a singer, whether it's this ex-pilot turned peace activist, and then they had their assets in the media. Like this guy was uncovered as one, William Bradford Huey. He was a very influential writer at that time, and he actually was also involved in the cover-up of the Martin Luther King assassination, which is another story. So they used him for these purposes. So that is and he had strong ties to the CIA that are documented. So it is a violation of their charter. These kind of things seem to all be violations of their charter, and they're trying to manipulate public opinion against progressive ideas, peace movements and causes, progressive views, and that manipulation of public opinion is a violation of the CIA charter. But that's something the CIA does extensively. And William Casey privately bragged that we know our program is correct when everything the American public believes is a lie, and that's these are good examples because they're defaming good people. They're spreading false rumors about them, so people think they're actually bad people, either sexual deviants or in the Etherly case that all kinds of defamatory things were spread about him. And so a lot of people would be influenced by that. Even myself, sometimes, I read a lot, and sometimes I'll read something and think very poorly of somebody, and only later do I realize that there was a hit job on that person. I mean,
Oh,
they
absolutely.
still do it. Like they defame people, even with obituaries. It just came up. This guy Michael Parente just passed away, a great intellectual, and the New York Times wrote this horrific obituary, making out like he was an apologist for dictators, and a lot of people would read that and might see how this guy was, they would think negatively of him. So, and these are often CIA linked people, or they have some link to intelligence agencies who write these hatchet pieces.
Well, it's like John McCain. I've had people say to me, "Yes, John McCain. He was a good guy. He was one of the good. He was a gentleman." And I would say, "Have you ever heard of the Keating Five scandal? You know what I mean? You do. How much do you know? No. What about it? That's why you would say that the man was a crook, a warmonger. You never heard him singing "Bomb, Bomb, 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 Bomb." Iran. He was the worst. And the media paints John McCain as he was one of these gentlemen,
Mm-hmm.
one of these people. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, in Congress, there was exactly one person who voted against Martin Luther King's birthday becoming a holiday, and his name was John McCain. The guy
Mm-hmm.
was a racist, a pig, a scumbag, a warmonger. All things bad was John McCain. But the media writes, oh, he was just such a good, nice, kind gentleman. Anyway, speaking of criminals in Congress, but I repeat myself, Senate Armed Services Committee member profited from the Venezuela. Well, what a shock. Mark Wayne Mullen bought stock in leading defense and oil companies just 5 days before Trump ordered the kidnapping of Maduro. So your thoughts on this article and how these scumbags are doing the usual criminality, for instance, selling all their stock and telling everybody to sell their stock just before the COVID crash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, Mark Wayne Mullen and others. There was a report in the Quincy Institute that showed a very wide pattern of stock trading, and often they're getting insider information. So they may be violating insider trading laws and practices. And this guy Mullen bought the stock in Chevron and Raytheon, with now RTX, 5 days before the Venezuelan invasion, and he sits on the Senate Armed Service Committee, so he was privy to certain intelligence and plans about that invasion in advance. And Chevron just happens to be the only U.S. oil company that had investments in Venezuela before the invasion and stood to benefit massively from it. Now they're openly pushing the privatization of Venezuela's oil industry, and I think that the Venezuelan government has acquiesced. And so Chevron stands to be one of the biggest beneficiaries. And lo and behold, Mullen had bought stock 5 days before when he knew of this invasion, and he's already his net worth is said to be around 30 to 40 million already. So he's going to make a lot more money, and he's one of the biggest war hawks in Congress. He championed the huge military budgets, championed this. He was very zealous in the support for the Venezuelan intervention. I wonder why. Just like Ukraine, Gaza, wherever he's supporting the war, wherever it is. and he's a very ignorant man. He doesn't even have a college degree. He's one of the only members of Congress who lacks even a college degree, and he passed legislation. He sponsored a bill in 2022 that would allow American citizens to fight for Ukraine. And when he was promoting it, he said, "We have to stop the communists, the Russian communists." And he's so, pardon my insult, but I mean, this guy is just an ignoramus. He said, he's so stupid that he doesn't even know that Vladimir Putin is not a communist and that the Soviet Union fell in 1991. But one reason, because I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and because I got a job teaching for a period at the University of Tulsa, and so I followed Oklahoma, and I actually have done freelance reporting in the state. And his predecessor, James Inhofe, because I did an op-ed for a local paper about 7 years ago, when James Inhofe, it came out that James Inhofe, who was this longstanding senator from Oklahoma, and the same, Mullen replaced Inhofe, and Inhofe was also a Hawks hawk, and it came out around 2017 that he bought stock with Raytheon, and this was just before Saudi Arabia invaded Yemen, and Raytheon had a lot of the missiles that were used in Yemen. And then Inhofe was a key person on the Senate Armed Service Committee and the Senate trying to block legislation, because there were some senators who wanted to bar U.S. military aid to Saudi and arms sales, particularly arms sales to Saudi Arabia, so long it was involved in attacking Yemen, which was considered a genocide. And Inhofe was involved in blocking that legislation to ensure that the arms sales could go forward. And Raytheon was the one making a fortune, and he had stock in Raytheon. And then, these guys present themselves as these great Christians, and meanwhile, it's the most unethical behavior. I mean, that was a biblical scale crime in Yemen. It was biblical scale suffering of the Yemeni population that he was profiting off that immiseration, and now Mullen is doing the same and profiting off the immiseration of Venezuela and the sell-off of its oil resources. But the socialist government starting under Chavez had tried to use to benefit the Venezuelan people and economy and enact social welfare programs. So these guys, really, it's the peak of immorality. But there's not enough pushback. There should be protests outside his office and move to get rid of him. But these guys keep winning election after election, which is sad. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not just Oklahoma. This is going on nationwide. And this Quincy Institute report, it's just linked in the article, was a very good study that just provided a lot of details about that and some of the corrupt congressional figures, one of whom was Nancy Pelosi, and he ranked the senators and congressmen as far as their stock deals. And actually, a lot of the top ones were Democrats. The top guy was a New Jersey Democrat, Josh
Gottheimer.
And then Nancy Pelosi was, I think, number 2. So these are Democrats. And Nancy Pelosi had huge stock in Google, which is getting more and more involved with military technology. And then there was a guy, and the report noted that a Republican senator from Alabama was chairing a hearing where he was supposed to be scrutinizing certain practices by Lockheed Martin, yet he owned all this stock in Lockheed Martin. So is he really an objective investigator? And then there is an act, John Ossoff of Georgia was trying to pass a sensible act to block congressional stock trading, but I don't think it's getting very far, because so many congressmen own stock and are making so much money that they don't want to pass it. So.
Yeah, we see that we see this over and over and over. Now, one of the other things, once again, Covert Action Magazine that we're talking about, this is Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov. He's the editor over at Covert Action Magazine, and of course, a major contributor. We can get back to the main page. Sooner or later, we will. Moving slow. I don't know why it's frozen. It's frozen me up. I don't think that's an accident. But one of the things, the other things I wanted to bring up is, I got to bring this up to you. I've got to bring this up to you since we've covered that, both of those. Let me find this. Well, big news. The people who brought us no kings, they're back. They're going to have this is now, they don't say they're new kings, but it's February 27th and 28th. The American people take over DC for a soundbite, for a reckoning, march for democracy against corruption, cruelty, political cowardice. If you read it, there's this, just like no kings, there's absolutely nothing to it. Who we are, a movement built by the people. They want to silence. We're workers. It still doesn't say who they are. Why we march? We march because corruption has been. There's nothing here. Veterans are abandoned. Families are crushed. Stand up to these cowards. What we're fighting for. Listen, our demands are simple. A country that doesn't screw its people. What does that mean? I don't even know what it means. So when you look now, partner with the people. Let's look at all of their partners. You want to look at their partners? This is going to be great. We'll get to see their partners. I'm very excited about seeing their partners, Jeremy. You're going to love their partners. Nothing to see here. Nothing. Let's see. Let's look at their partners. Who might it be? Oh, look at this. Donald loves Vladimir. There we go. There's Russiagate partners. Now, what's interesting, if you look at all the, Fox takedown, we've got that, right? Indivisible. Well, Indivisible. Those were the people behind No Kings. They're the people that funded it. There's the people. Let's see. It was Ezra Greenberg or Ezra Levin and what's her name? Green. I forgot their name. But anyway, they were the people behind that. So if you look at it, there's like nothing here. But let's do this. Let's take a look at Donald loves Vladimir. I'm sure, there we go. Everything, this is just anti-Trump, DC against the Trump agenda. Let's look at Donald loves Vladimir. I think that would be a good place to go to start, so we can see how.
I mean, that's pathetic. I mean, given what happened yesterday, when Trump pulled out of the New START, or refused to ratify the START agreement. I mean, if he loved Vladimir,
Donnie loves Vladimir. Let's click on that. The Donald Trump Putin connection is one of the most significant political standards in modern. There we go. And they got articles here, right? I mean, plenty of articles. Look, really, you got pictures.
Orwellian, and right? And it's sad that this is supposed. This is just the epitome of controlled opposition.
Trump's ties to Putin. Trump's long shady history.
They want to channel public disaffection into this Russophobia and further ramping up of the new Cold War and the war in Ukraine. And we know that's leading to the death of many Ukrainians. I mean, they're being frozen this winter. They've had their energy cut off, and life is hell for people. It's been hell for people in eastern Ukraine for over 10 years. And it's increasingly hell for the people of Ukraine as a whole. And they sacrificed an entire generation of youth, and a lot of their youth are being kidnapped off the streets. And they have, from what I understand, they have so many men have been either killed or forced to flee the country that they don't have enough men to work in the economy. And that's one reason people are freezing there. They don't have enough plumbers or skilled workers. So this Russophobia has led in a horrific direction to horrific consequences, and it's ridiculous that we're still hearing this about Trump loving Putin, especially when we see Trump's record is really terrible with regard to Russia. I mean, he's ramped up in his 5 years now as president. The war on Ukraine has continued in all those years, and all the weapons going to Ukraine. He's pulled out of its treaties with Russia. So if he supposedly Putin's best friend, why did he pull out of these arms control treaties like INF in his first term and now allow the START treaty to expire? That's the exact opposite behavior,
Well,
And
come on. Trump's
anyway,
plane was parked next to a Russian government jet. How are you going to overcome that kind of damning evidence? His plane was photographed. Look, there's his plane. There's a Russian jet. I mean, come on. At this point, I think it is. We might as well just give up and say that's that. Now let's go down and see, because they have partners. They have partners exposing the truth, allies in the fight. Let's look at their partners. Oh, here's the one. Let's see. Oh, look. I wonder if MI6 is involved. Hope, not hate. See, that's their UK people. And the same old kinds of thing. They've got Islamophobia, racism, something about Ghislaine Maxwell. There we go. How we work. So hope needs you. I don't know what that means, but hope needs me. So we can see that hope, not hate is covered. Let's see. If we go back to let's take a look here. Exposing the truth. Marching orders. Get all the details and show where it matters. So here we have see the receipts. So there you go. You've got Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin there. That's part of I guess what this march coming up. Let's see. We'll get back to here. See, they're partnered with the people. So they're going to help us to learn that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are connected to each other. I think that's one of the things that they're marching for. Right now, let's look at we need to shop because they're selling all kinds of good items. So let's look and see what we've got here. We got Black Lives Matter, gay something or other, be gay and fight fascism. There you go, the woke stuff. We've got a whole bunch of diverse people to look at here. The George Takei's a part of this. There we go. Look, diverse people all over there. Browse by category. Let's see what we can buy for men. Shop now. Oh no, I think they've locked me out. I think we may not be able to buy anything. Oh, let's see. There we've got some stuff here. Oh, look. This is the t-shirt I've got to get. I think this is the one that's going to cover it all. This is my favorite. Come on. This appears to have a Russian flag. Look at this. We got a Russian flag. We got Vladimir Putin. We've got Assad, and we have Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh, that's really terrible. That is really, really terrible.
Yeah, but if you're going to go
that is really offensive
to this stuff, okay. Let's see. Little Marco.
No, that's what happened.
Oh, here's another great one.
Relates to our discussion about the CIA infiltrating domestic politics against its charter, and that's what you have as an opposition movement when the CIA is running it. They turn it into this Russophobic display with this far right. It's in fact critiquing Trump from the right. They want more hardline foreign policy toward Russia and maybe even nuclear war. And they're, using McCarthyite smears against Tulsi Gabbard. That was always, it was coming from the Democratic Party, and they labeled her as an Assad and Putin lover when she was advocating for diplomacy and scaling back of conflict and limiting the threat of nuclear war with Russia. They attacked her in McCarthyite terms. So this is really offensive stuff. And
now,
what are we? When the CIA is running social movements, and that's been their job for years, is to co-opt opposition movement and social movements, and that's what they did with the '60s movements. They had different tactics, including pushing the drug culture over more serious, protest culture. That was one strategy. Another was to develop these ultra radical sects that would alienate people by violence, like the Weather Underground and the Symbionese Liberation Army, which did criminal acts like kidnapping Patty Hearst and calling all police pigs. and stuff like that. That was CIA, so that people would hate the activists and New Left movement and discredit it. And then they do things like this. They push Russophobia and a hawkish foreign
now
policy,
I gotta tell you,
McCarthyism.
I might have to attend, because now when you look and say, what are we marching for? The people are done being ignored and we're not asking. Okay, let's see what we're marching for. Let's start. Military personnel. Oh boy, I got to get to the street, because we must assure immediate high quality health care for all service members. Commit to ending unnecessary military occupations and prioritizing diplomacy and human rights. Yeah, I believe that when I see it. We must guarantee survivor-centered support. Oh, here we go. Reinstate military benefits for all transgender service members. Provide gender-affirming care. Provide comprehensive LGBTQI something support. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm supposed to take to the street. They're mad. They're marching for democracy, because we got to make sure that we provide gender-affirming care for the military. Their first 8 demands are all for the military. I'm going to take to the street because I want democracy. Doggone it. And we're standing for democracy. We got to get together. What? Well, let's start with marching for the military. What the hell?
And what the hell with that T-shirt? Because they claim to be against endless war, and yet of all the political figures, whatever her flaws, Gabbard or contradictions, you know, in 2020, the Democratic primary, she was the only candidate who was challenging U.S. foreign policy toward Russia and Syria and calling for diplomacy and de-escalation of those conflicts. And then they're and she was attacked viciously in McCarthyite term by Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, and they're promoting the attacks on McCarthyite attacks on her on a T-shirt. So how could they claim to be standing for peace when they use that? And that's like what we've been describing with Eartha Kitt. They use the defamations. They're trying to defame her as somehow unpatriotic and in the pocket of foreign dictators, which is totally false. She was advocating for diplomacy at that time. So
look, have you noticed something? Every one of the websites look alike. Every single website looks alike, as if they were all made by the same person. At any rate, I got to get ready to run. I'm getting a call now. I got to do an 11 o'clock. I mean, that's what we're looking at now. It's clearly an intelligence operation, and clearly no kings. What are you standing for? Let's start. We need gender affirming care in the military. That's what I'm marching for. That's democracy. Yes. And not only that, we got to stand up, because Tulsi Gabbard is a puppet of Putin, and Assad's not even in charge of the country anymore. But who gives a damn? Let's go for it anyway. We got to stand
just
up.
Like in foreign country, when they co-opt the protest movement with these color revolutions, there may be some legitimate, ground for dissent. Like now, obviously, there are legitimate reasons to oppose what the Trump administration, but they co-opt these protest movements and channel it in directions that they want.
Yeah.
Or
well,
counterproductive direction.
I got to run. Everybody go to covertactionmagazine.com. That's covertactionmagazine.com to find out all the good works of Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov and his people who are exposing the miscreant activity of the intelligence operations. We're out.